Hello there, and thanks for joining me live tonight. A little later than I planned because I was at my daughter's volleyball game and just running a little late, but I really wanted to share today about functional neurologic disorders and sensory training because this was a big question that came up from our workshop this week. And by the way, if we haven't met, my name is Julia Hirschberg. I am a neurologic physical therapist and the owner and founder of Reactive Therapy and Wellness. And we just did a free workshop for clinicians. It's available, recorded now. If you're interested in it, you can watch it through next week. So you have a whole week to take a look at our FND workshop. And by the way, thank you if you came to it because it was fabulous. I loved having all those clinicians there. And we got a lot of questions, particularly when it comes to functional neurologic disorder treatment and the sensory system. So surprised that we got these questions because we shared a case and we use our pie chart framework, which I'm going to pull up here in a moment. We shared a case where the person really had a large component of sensory symptoms and also just sensory pieces underlying her other motor symptoms and even autonomic symptoms. There's a lot of overlap and interplay between these types of symptoms. And so we shared a case and we were able to share some of the treatment, but of course not all of it. So I wanted to share some of the things that we use for sensory training. And by the way, this is not only just helpful for functional neurologic disorders, this is helpful for many things, but dystonia, CRPS are two of the things that I think sensory training is so helpful for. So the disclaimer for sensory training is that you need to test it first, right? So you need to have a good and thorough assessment to understand where you're going to go on the sensory pathway. So that would include things like testing for a sensory profile and looking at the person's sensory processing, looking at all of their sensory systems. So vestibular, visual, hearing, smelling, tasting, and I'm not saying testing all of these in depth, but screening these pieces because the integration is what's so important, and looking at multiple sensory sensitivities is also really important when it comes to functional neurologic disorders. So a very thorough assessment is what's going to lead you down to treatment, because I think otherwise you're just throwing sensory things and seeing what sticks, and that is not really helpful, and it's also not very efficient. You want to test it out and then go down the path of treatment where you see, it's due to this sensory processing difference, or it's due to this difficulty with sensory perception, and then you can direct your treatment right to that. So some of the common sensory findings, by the way, that we see are differences in sensory processing. So we work with our OTs really closely for sensory profile testing, either in the child one, adolescent, or adult. And then we look at general sensation, of course, but I think what's most important, or more important even, is a higher order sensation. So, for example, graphesthesia, stereognosis, we'll look at 2-point discrimination. We'll do a sensory grid or map for discrimination. Vestibular testing, both our standard vestibular test, but also doing those with an external focus can really highlight some of the difficulties with those. We also, I'm a firm believer, thank you, Jamie and Catherine, for their theory of optic flow, but I'm a very firm believer now in testing according to the difficulty of the optic flow in the vestibular system. So test it, then you can go into treatment. So here are some of the things that we may use based on what those testing findings may be. So we may take, if a person does have a deficit in that higher order sensory processing, like graphesthesia, stereognosis, we'll bring that right into treatment. And I've shared a couple of examples recently, like using the dice or dominoes is the word that I was looking for sensory discrimination training, but also that stereognosis, because you're manipulating it in the hands. We will also, for more of that sensory perceptual training, I shared this in a video today. We will use the Recognize app. It is an app that you have to purchase, and you do have to purchase it for different body parts. So hands, arms, neck, back, knees, and feet. I love all of them. And what's nice is that you can test it, and then you can use the app for treatment. But you could also, by the way, there are, gosh, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there is a free app for doing the same kind of thing. It's just not quite as good as the Recognize app. And you can do treatment that's not in the app as well. So the person doesn't have to buy the app, but we do things like having the person identify right or left body parts in pictures of magazines and things like that. So that can be really helpful for that higher order perceptual training. Something that, again, thank you, Jamie and Catherine, our colleagues who teach the Positive Spin course, really keyed us into is testing and then treating any otolith dysfunction or hypersensitivities. And this is where we might use weighting a lot. So a weighted vest can be really helpful, weighted neck pillow, weighted arm sleeves. There's a lot of different ways we can use weighting to help re-weight the proprioceptive input for our integration of sensory information. That can be really helpful. We do graded sensory exposure, and this is not a graded exposure to like a noxious stimulus necessarily, but this is something that we use a lot in CRPS if a person has allodynia or some sensitivities to touch. We can actually grade that exposure, and it's been really helpful to add in external focus to that graded sensory exposure as well. So we found that to be really helpful. Just changing the sensory experience of a task. So what surface the person is sitting on. Are they sitting? Are they lying down? Are they prone? I really love getting people upside down or forward over leaning forward in a chair, for example. So changing the sensory experience that changes the inputs of to the otolith as well. Love using, and now this depends on the person's sensory profile, but if they actually are sensory seeking, we may use bouncing on balls and doing like a balance board and things like that to increase some of that sensory input and change the sensory experience overall. The other thing that I love is any sort of vibration. And I think, I'm going to grab my vibration ball. I'll just show this to you because I love it. And not affiliated with this company, but I just happen to really love it. And it comes in several sizes. What I like about the vibration ball is that you can roll it under your feet, roll it under your thigh, roll it on your back. And for some people, this makes symptoms worse. And for other people, it's really beneficial. And we talked in our case in the workshop on Tuesday about how we did use vibration to increase sensory input to the arms and legs and trunk and so on for somebody who had a functional loss of sensation and a loss of motor control in the trunk. Another way we can do this is with TENS. So any kind of TENS unit and use that over areas. And again, this is something we really need to test out, because for some people that actually is too much stimulation, it makes it worse, and for other people it's a whole lot better. I don't have it here with me, but we also really love using the Venom, same brand, by the way, of Hyper Ice, but it's the Venom Go, and it's got a sticker and you can stick it on a part. And so when somebody has a functional tremor or dystonia, sometimes that it provides heat or vibration, which is really nice, and you can just stick it on and go with it. And that's been really helpful for some of our sensory training as well. So there you have it. I wanted to give you a layout of some of those pieces of our sensory pie when it comes to treatment. And again, it starts with a good assessment so you can get to that treatment. But I think this is often an overlooked area of at least physical therapy treatment. I think our OT colleagues maybe do a little better job of this, but I'm obsessed with the sensory system. So this is something that we talk about, we incorporate into treatment, certainly at Reactive, but within our education, within our Brain Bites group. So I will remind you that workshop, the FND workshop, if you haven't seen it, if you're a clinician, you can get the recording now through next week. You can just go to reactiveeducation.com/FND workshop 2023. And if you are a healthcare provider, if you're a clinician, our community of clinicians is now open. So our Brain Bites community is open. It's just open for a week. So we close the door a week from today, on the 27th actually. And if you are a clinician that is passionate about neuroscience, that has a huge, big heart for making a difference in some of the most misunderstood cases, and you're a trailblazer, you're looking to do things differently, this is the community that we've created, and our doors are open. We only open them twice a year, so we'd love to have you with us and do all these fun sensory things with us all year long. So you can check that out at reactiveeducation.com/Brain Bites. And thanks again for being with me here tonight. I appreciate that, and I hope you have a wonderful night.